Good afternoon. Happy Thursday. Hope everyone is awesome. Well, we're like half the room we have been. Is everybody just late? I don't know. My goodness. Luckily, all the important people are here, so we can start diving right in. All right, so let's dive into, so as you know, we're heading into source of business today. I just wanted to start with a quick story. You may hear more about this next week if I decide to broadcast it wide. But since it just kind of happened in the last 48 hours, I want to make sure that you guys hear about it, because I told you that's what I would do, right? Any topical stuff, bring to you so you can just kind of hear some of the real world stuff that sometimes happens. As you may know, Fairfield County in and of itself is typically a little different than the rest of the state of Connecticut in terms of how we write offers, what kind of documents we use. Some of the process is a little bit different, right? Because most of the rest of the state just uses that 4-page standard contract in the MLS. And in Fairfield County, depending on what part of Fairfield County you are practicing in, we've always done it just a little bit differently. For example, along the coast, right up until kind of central Fairfield County, we've always used the 2-page purchase agreement. Up in northern Fairfield County, kind of Ridgefield, Reading, and north and Greater Danbury, we've always used the 1-page non-binding offer to purchase form to write offers on. And of course, if you're working in Greenwich, well, they do it more like New York, where it's really more of a letter of intent, right? And so Fairfield County has always been this kind of hodgepodge of how do you actually do business. And about 12 to 18 months ago, what happened is we came out of that lockdown period. We weren't quite sure what the market was going to do. We prepared for the absolute worst, and what did we get? We got the absolute best, right? We got 12, now going on maybe 15, 16 months of a rocket ship ride that we're still not off of, right? That no one on April 1st of 2020 could have predicted. I mean, truly. I mean, we for those of you who were around, you remember some of the things that we did. We changed the way we spent our money. We jostled expenses all around to make sure that we were hoarding cash. We were talking to landlords, and all that stuff that you do when there's so much uncertainty. And then it all just blasted off, right? And so what's the point? The point is, in the last 12 months, Fairfield County has joined the rest of the state of Connecticut in recognizing that that 4-page contract is not such a bad way to do business, right? For those of you who have been around for a little longer, have you ever seen more use of that 4-page contract than you have in the last 12 months of business, right? No, because when you work in Fairfield County, it just hadn't shown up. Just so you know, my prediction, I don't think that the horse is out of the barn on that one now. I don't think we're ever going back. I think we're just charging forward now, and that standard form contract is going to be more and more the norm, and people using those other documents will become fewer and fewer as we charge forward. But what's the point in me telling you all that? The point in me telling you all that is that in the last few months, I've had an interesting experience where 3 different times your colleagues have found their clients in lawsuits because they got less than stellar advice from someone who was representing them on the legal side, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean that our conversation with our sellers when they accept an offer on a 4-page contract, or frankly, any piece of paper, and then something else comes in after they've signed the first piece of paper and they come to us, because that's who they come to. They come to us and say, what can I do? Can I dump the first one and go to the second one? Is that okay? What's the answer to that? When that occurs, what is the answer?
No.
So John's saying no. That could be the answer. However, your answer is great question. Let's get your attorney on the phone, right? Because we don't practice law. We don't have law degrees. And if any of you do, in fact, have a law degree, you don't bring your law degree to the table when you're utilizing your real estate license, right? Because every once in a while, there's somebody with a law degree in Ignite, which is awesome, except that you're not going to be the attorney and the realtor for the same client. So you have to leave your law degree at home that day. So fast forwarding to the point. The point is we have had more people than ever before locally utilizing a document that our attorneys locally are not really used to seeing. And so what I have found is that sometimes that means our sellers are getting kind of cocky advice, or the attorneys that are giving the advice are being very casual about how they treat the termination of a signed contract. And 3 times in the last 6 months, that has turned into a lawsuit being filed. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the first buyer who believes they have a valid contract, when the seller comes back and says, yeah, you know what, I don't think we want them anymore, we got somebody better over here, they go and they record the contract that they want to perform on. They file a lawsuit for specific performance of that particular contract. Once they record the contract and file that suit, guess what happens? They tie up the house. Can't convey a property where there's another contract recorded on the land records that may be involved in litigation. So it kind of brings everything to a halt. And then the seller gets put in this position of having to, because by that time, the second buyer is already along the process. So oftentimes you have somebody who thinks they want to buy the house yelling and screaming over here, and the person that has been chosen is going ahead and doing their inspections and incurring costs and all that stuff. And there's only one house to sell. And so I'll tell you that these issues that have come up, we have to be aware that part of our job is to be the safety net for all of this, right? In the last scenario that happened over the last 72 hours or so, our agent, now again, she had no responsibility to send some written notification to the first buyer's attorney indicating that the seller was terminating the contract. The 4-page contract I'm talking about that's found on the MLS, if you look at paragraph 8 in that contract, it's the bottom of the first page, it says that either party may cancel for any reason upon written notice to the other party during a 5-day attorney review period, right? That's just built into the contract, 5-day attorney review period. In this last scenario, the attorney for the seller was very casual. And so he picked up the phone and he called the other attorney and said, yep, they're going in a different direction, and never followed it up, never gave written notice. And the document states written notice. And so that just emboldened the first buyers to yell and scream and pound their chest and start filing some things that prevented anyone from moving forward. In my opinion, it was an error on the part of that attorney. However, our agent also didn't create any safety net underneath all of that. She didn't go and text or email, put something in writing to the other agent saying, following up the attorney's conversation, just wanted to be clear that this contract is being terminated based on the 5-day attorney review period, right? So had she done that, we might have been able to use that as at least written notice and calm everybody down and prevent what occurred over that period of time. So what's my point? My point is we're not there to practice law. However, we're there for redundancy, right? And every conversation that you have with somebody really should be followed up with. It should be followed up with via text and or email. And I know that sounds like a real pain, but if Silva and I have a conversation around some buyer or some seller, and I hang up the phone with her, what I said or I think I said and what she heard or what she thinks she heard could be two different things, right? Maybe I said something and she heard it differently. Maybe I meant something that I used a word that kind of could be interchangeable. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to choose to hear it this way. Sometimes people hear things the way they want to hear them, right? And so for me to sit down and follow up that conversation with a quick email to Silva saying, hey, Silva, great to speak to you. I just wanted to follow up our conversation in which we discussed X, Y, and Z, and here's how that's going to be handled. So it's just a habit. That's a long story to get me to a short strategy for you. And that is build the habit starting from the very beginning that every time you have a conversation with somebody, you follow it up. If it's transaction related, follow it up. Text or email, doesn't matter. You could write it in a letter and give it to a carrier pigeon if you so choose, right? As long as you have a copy of it and they have a copy of it. Carrier pigeons make a real mess though in your yard. So I would think twice about the whole carrier pigeon route. Any questions, comments, concerns about the story I just told?
So like in my interpretation, it seems like us as realtors are kind of like the glue to everything.
Yeah, I like that description, John. Because you are the glue. And here's the thing. Like you don't have to be the glue. You only have to be the glue if you want something to close. Right? People come to me all the time and say, I feel like I have to do everybody's job. And my response is, well, you don't have to do everybody's job. I'm just curious. Do you want the property to close? Well, yes. Well, then, okay. Well, then just make sure that your hand is in everything. That doesn't mean you're going and doing the job of the attorney or doing the job of the loan officer or the inspector, but your hand is in it all. Absolutely. Your job is to keep all the plates spinning, right? Did you ever see that act where they do the spinning plates, right? And they start down here and they put a plate on the top of the little pole and they start to spin it and they do the next one and then they do the next one and then they do the next one and then they do the next one. By the time they get here, the plate at the end starts to wobble. So you got to kind of run back over here and then do the next one. That's you. That's what we do. We keep all of the plates spinning. I one time had an agent come to me and say, I'm so upset because something that I thought was closing this week is probably not closing now for at least a month, maybe 6 weeks. And I said, well, tell me more about that. And she went on to describe how everybody involved had done such a terrible job. And I said, well, tell me about that. And she said, well, the scenario is there are tenants in place and they have to be given a 30-day notice. And the landlord didn't give them any notice. And the attorney didn't remind the landlord to give them notice. And it's Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, nobody came to the table to give these people notice. And I said, so can I ask a couple of questions? You'll find that is sometimes a loaded question when I ask you that question, right? So she said, well, of course. And I said, well, who's the listing agent? And she said, well, me. And I thought, okay, am I missing something? Did you know that 30-day notice had to be given? Yes. Okay, well, so where were you in all of this? And she looked at me like I had 6 heads and said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're blaming everybody in the transaction for not getting something done. As the listing agent, is it not part of our role as a listing agent to keep all the plates spinning? Sounds like 30-day notice to a tenant to vacate the property to make sure a closing can happen on time is one of the plates. And that plate fell and crashed. But she didn't like me so much for the rest of that week. But we got over it. But my point was, it's really easy to show up and say everybody else is terrible and now I don't have a closing tomorrow. It's a whole lot different if you show up and say, you know what could I have done differently to avoid this issue? Where could I have inserted myself? Right, in that scenario, there's a reminder in my phone to talk to the landlord. There's a reminder in my phone to talk to the landlord's attorney. Just in case the landlord doesn't want to hear it from me, they can hear it from their attorney. There might even be a reminder in my phone if the circumstances are such that I'm reminding myself to contact the tenant, if I have a relationship with the tenant, to make sure that they contact the landlord. I'm like, there's a whole lot of ways that could have gone differently and still closed on time if the listing agent would have just taken responsibility for the plate spinning, for the reminding, for the checking in, for is there anything I can do to help move this forward, right? Because that's the role. Make sense? Yeah, Dana.
Yeah, can I just ask a question going back to the beginning of your segment on this, which was the 4-page contract? Do you want us from now on, henceforward going, to use that form above all the others when we're making offers?
I do not. I would encourage you to have your clients make the choice about which document they want to present offers on. You can you can outline the pros and the cons of each. We will do that together, by the way, towards the end of our time together, and just make sure that we understand the documents. But I wouldn't be making those decisions. I would make decisions based on what the client's needs and desires are, but also what is reasonable and customary in the geographic area that you are writing an offer in, right? I had someone ask me earlier today, as a listing agent, are there pros and cons of accepting an offer on a 4-page contract versus something else? My answer is, it depends. Are there pros and cons? Yes. Which one is better? Well, it depends on what the seller is looking to do, right? From the seller's side, somebody writing something on a 4-page contract, I don't know. I kind of think that they're pretty serious buyers, right? They're willing to get locked in. And just by the way, there are a lot of agents, especially in Fairfield County, because that document is a little newer to agents in Fairfield County than it is to people in the rest of the state. Right, Donna Doyle, I'm curious. Are you just over the border enough that 4-page contracts are pretty standard in your world, or are you still using?
Yeah,
Okay.
standard contract.
Right.
We don't use a binder. We go right to contract on a standard 4-page.
Okay, so you're using the MLS standard 4-page one for the most part.
Well, it was my old company's standard 4-page, but I have sold things in Fairfield County and I send it that way. And sometimes the attorney will write up a whole new contract. Sometimes they'll accept it. So I try that way first.
Yeah, agreed. And so again, it's really what's more reasonable and customary. I will tell you that as an agent who grew up in Fairfield County in terms of a business, growing a business, I was always used to, and I do it in most of my business in Northern Fairfield County. So I was using 1-page offer to purchase forms, that say right on the bottom across it, this is not a contract. Like, this is not worth the paper that it's written on type thing. It was really just an outline, an agreement to agree, not really binding in any way, shape, or form. And when I started to buy investment properties in Waterbury and Naugatuck, well, that's New Haven County out that way. And it took me years to break the habit of how I was used to writing offers, right? Because I would write it on an offer to purchase form and send it to the listing agent, and they would call me and say, what is this? Like, are you kidding me? Where's the contract? Like, oh crap, I forgot. So doing things that are reasonable and customary to the listing agent's territory is also oftentimes to your buyer's benefit, simply because the listing agent then understands that document better than a document that they've never seen before. Sometimes listing agents describe documents they haven't seen before, not all that positively to their seller clients. right? So there is the game of where am I writing my offer? I should likely use the documentation that that those people utilize more often than not. The last thing I'll say on that, and then I'll go to John's question, is generally speaking, the listing agent and the seller, they drive that bus. Right. So if the seller and the listing agent have decided that the only thing they're going to accept are 4-page contracts, and you send something in on a purchase agreement or an offer to purchase the other versions of these documents, you may well be told to rewrite it on a 4-page contract. I had that question earlier in the week. Well, if someone asks me that, do I have to do it? Well, it depends. How badly do your buyers want the property, right? Because if the seller and the listing agent have decided they're only reviewing offers that are written on actual 4-page standard form contracts, you probably want to rewrite it on that contract or decide to go buy something else. As the buyer's agent and the buyer, you don't really have much of a leg to stand on to sit and pound your chest saying, no, that's not how we do it where I'm from, right? Nobody cares. They want it done the way they want it done. I think I over-answered that question, and yet there you have the answer. Go ahead, John.
So I'm like a 22-minute new agent, as you say all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm also 20 years young, so I never purchased a house ever. So I've never actually, I mean, I seen a contract once because one of my friends, I helped them kind of like with their grandma's closing their house recently.
Mm-hmm.
Besides that, how do I know like what's like are the norms in terms of like which contracts are being used in which parts of Fairfield County?
Yeah, I'm going to teach you that. I'm just not going to teach you that tonight. Right, so we will cover that. We'll cover each of the 3 forms. There are videos of me going through each of those 3 standard forms already posted on YouTube. I will also have another live session on that, so we can go through it and you can ask questions. But if you have a need to know the difference between those forms and how those forms are filled out, you can go to the YouTube library right now. And well, don't do it right now. Do it at 6. But that information exists already, but you just have to decide to watch it Memorex, not live. And we will get to it. Make sense? All right, guys. So that's my topical intro for you this morning, right? Just remember, right? You gotta spin all the plates, and some of that, sometimes that means being the safety net for some of the other players involved. I will tell you that the one that ended up not in a lawsuit or out of a lawsuit finally today, and it's moving forward. The property is being sold to the first buyers who recorded their contract, even though the sellers had indicated they were canceling it and they were about to file it. So the lawsuit has now been withdrawn. I'm not sure it was ever actually filed with the court, but that they made it sound like it was. They're withdrawing that. They're removing the recorded contract because they got to win. They got to move forward, and the seller gets to pay damages to the second buyer because the second buyer had expenses that they now want covered in order to remove themselves from the situation. And by the way, the first offer that was accepted that now they're moving forward with, which they tried to dump to go to the second one, was $50,000 less money. So at the end of the day, those sellers, based on a casual review of a contract by an attorney and an even more casual response to the seller's wishes, with then no safety net underneath it by the real estate agent, cost those sellers $50K or more. Right? That's not right. That's not right. The good news is that these sellers don't appear to be suing anyone. Because if anybody has a right to sue somebody for some kind of negligence, it's likely them. Because they're the ones who have to write the checks over here and accept less money. So that's a shame. Okay, let's move into happier territory. Let's move into sources of business, right? We started with orphans last night, which was fun. I've never started with orphans before. That's usually one of the last ones we cover. So we started with orphans. Now we'll move backwards. So let's have a conversation around open houses, because for many of you, open houses, especially when you're, well, I guess now, John, you're 23 minutes into your career, right? When you're just starting out, open houses is one of the best ways for you to put yourself into the path of business, right? The whole name of this game is build a database, communicate with it, convert the opportunities that come from it, and then look for opportunities to find and meet new people, right? The strangers, and pull them into your inner circle. And one of the best ways for you to do that is to host open houses. And so if it's all right with you, I'd like to start there tonight and talk about open houses as a source of business. Somebody unmute and tell me, or anybody unmute and tell me, open houses, like, so what's the big whoop? What do you find at open houses?
Unrepresented buyers.
Yeah, so Nick says unrepresented buyers. You absolutely find them at open houses. Who else do you find?
People are just looking about might want to sell at a later date.
Yeah, so you have potential unrepresented sellers, right? Who else? Some of you are thinking, wait a minute, aren't there only two types of people here? Buyers and sellers? Who else might be there? Go ahead, Donna.
Nosy neighbors.
Yeah, so nosy neighbors, and we're going to talk about the brilliance of nosy neighbors, right? Nosy neighbors, as a listing agent, I was thrilled when the nosy neighbors came in, because that was my opportunity. Because nosy neighbors to me are about the same as what Dana put on the table, potential sellers for down the road. Who else shows up? Go ahead, John.
Renters.
So potential renters, yeah. And what do we know about renters? A year later, who do they turn into?
Buyers.
Right, buyers. So be careful about poo-pooing the renters came to my open house today, right? This is about building a business. Think career, not year. Think about the long game, right? Here's a couple of other people that show up. Sometimes sellers show up at your open house. And what I mean by that is people who are looking to list their house now. They're at your open house because they're doing research on properties that might be comparable to them. They also may be, without actually telling you, they don't show up with a big sign that says, smile for the camera, you're being interviewed, right? But they walk in not just to see the property, they walk in to see who's representing that property. How is it being represented? Might this be somebody who would represent our property in the same way? Therefore, when you are at an open house, one of the things I don't suggest is kicking off your shoes and sitting on the couch with your feet up on the coffee table reading the newspaper. When I was brand new in the industry, I walked into an agent's open house because one of the ways I learned the inventory was I did some stuff during the week, and then on the weekends I would go to open houses just to keep learning the inventory, right? And understanding why this house was priced at this point and all that kind of stuff. And I walked into an agent's open house, not from my office, and I actually had to wake him because his shoes were off, his feet were up on the coffee table, he had the newspaper open, and he was out like a light, taking a snooze, man. I don't encourage that, right? Because that is not what sellers are looking for in their auditioning process, right? Remember, I said last week, and I've said 910 times already, you're always modeling behavior. And so are you modeling the behavior of a talented listing agent who's representing a property to potential buyers in such a way that potential sellers who you think might be buyers would come in and then go back to their house and say, man, you know what? I think we need to contact her because I want her in charge of our house when we put it on the market, right? And then one of the last things I'll mention, people who come to open houses are the best kind, buyers who are unrepresented, who also have to sell. Woohoo! Right? There's a twofer for you. So lots and lots and lots of opportunity at open houses. Would you say? Would you agree with that? Cool. So let's kind of dive through. Let's start at the beginning and then move through to follow-up, because follow-up is going to be where we end this conversation on open houses. And it's a conversation that is crazy important, because a lot of people think that throwing some signs out and meeting people at the open house is how you get business at open houses. And what I'll tell you is how you have conversation at open houses and the follow-up post open house, that's how you win clients at open houses. So let's get there, right? First and foremost, some of you on this call don't have any actual listing inventory, right? So do you have an opportunity to do open houses? So Julie says yes. Some people say no. Julie, tell us why. What kind of opportunity do you have?
You have the opportunity to make friends with other agents and offer them to host their open houses.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So you belong to an organization that is almost 600 people strong. That there's power in that, right? Because as two brokerages with the same broker, you have an opportunity to host open houses for any of those listing clients, depending on where you want to host open houses, the price point that you might want to host open houses for. If you ask about an agent for an open house this Sunday and they say, no, I'm actually doing it myself this Sunday, well, you have other opportunities, right? You got more opportunities for open houses than most, and it doesn't have to be your inventory. Now, for those of you who do have your own inventory, I am also going to suggest that you utilize our size to your advantage to grow in directions that your own inventory may not be currently allowing you to grow. So what do I mean by that? Anybody want to tell me what I mean by that? While you're thinking through that through, I'll tell you this. I sometimes find that listing agents get trapped in their own inventory. And what that means is in their head, well, I have these 3 sellers right now, so I should just keep open housing those properties whenever I have an opportunity to make sure that they're getting the service that they deserve. Well, that might be true, and yet, what if you decided to broaden your horizons and look for additional open house opportunities that warrant yours, and then have somebody else come in and do yours? Just kind of change it up. I don't know about the rest of you, but as a listing agent, I got real sick and tired of hosting the same open house over and over and over again, right? So at some point, I would offer out my inventory to other people and then look to either swap with other listing agents. But let me go host an open house. At least it's a different view from the kitchen window. But here's the strategy behind that, right? The strategy behind that is you need to be hosting open houses based on which house might meet your goals. So here's what I mean by that. You want to find houses that are located in the territory where you want to sell property. You want to host open houses in the price point where you would prefer your buyers and sellers to show up. Because there is a reality that if you have a $699 house, 1.3 million buyers aren't coming to look at the $699 house, right? Just like $699 buyers are not coming to look at the $300,000 house, right? You're going to find that buyers are showing up for the most part, potential buyers and then potential sellers in about the same price range. A couple of years ago, I had an agent who said to me, I feel like I'm stuck. And I said, well, tell me about that. What are you stuck with? And she said, well, I'm spending a ton of time driving back and forth to Woodbury. She lived in Danbury. Maybe she lived south of Danbury, I can't remember. Driving back and forth to Woodbury. And, you know, the houses I'm showing in Woodbury aren't terribly expensive. I'm like in the high threes in Woodbury. And I keep getting all these buyers for the mid to high threes in Woodbury. And so I thought, well, that's kind of curious. Like that, tell me where you're finding these buyers. And she said, well, I'm finding them at open houses. And I said, well, which open houses? She said, well, I've been spending most of my time at a house for $379 in Woodbury lately. I'm like, hey, well, what if you didn't do that anymore, right? That again is like, doctor, it hurts when I do this. Okay, well, stop doing that, right? Pretty simple solution. And so we pivoted her off of that particular open house for $379 in Woodbury and started to position her in open houses in the 5s and 6s in central Fairfield County. And guess what? Her buyer pool changed because the people who were coming to those open houses were in that same price point. So just know that that's basically how things work. So you get to choose the open houses that you host based on the strategic result that you're looking to create on the other side. Any questions on that?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So if someone that has no listings, I should start off doing open houses for other people. Once I start getting my own inventory though, let's say I start getting my own inventory, to use your same numbers, like in houses worth around 300,000 or whatever, but I want to put to that $500,000-$600,000 range. How many times like I do open houses for my own properties, knowing that that's not the price point that I want to be at?
I think you get to make that decision. I mean, there are, look, as a listing agent, one of the things that I moved away from was I always promised open houses for my sellers, but I didn't promise myself in the open house, right? I did in the beginning, and I moved away from that after my first year or so, because like I said, you can get trapped in your own inventory. And if your own inventory is not producing the business growth that you're looking for, well, then there's other opportunities. Now, unless you are a listing agent who's carrying 10 to 15 listings at a time, there's also opportunity for you to do your own inventory and somebody else's, right? If open houses is one of your main pillars of generating new leads, right? We talked about what that looked like. On average, it's a minimum of 2 a weekend, every weekend for an entire year. It's 100 open houses. Guys, if you want the results that come with consistent open house hosting, strategic open house hosting, you need to understand what those numbers look like. If you're not hitting that 90, 95, 100 open houses in a year, right? I have people come to me all the time. You know what? I did open houses. It didn't work. Okay, well, talk to me about what your schedule has been. Well, I've done at least 10 or 12 since the beginning of the year. Oh my goodness, almost 1 a month. I'm surprised you have the energy to talk to me. Right? I mean, what remember, this is like full-time work. This is not somebody's part-time weekend gig. Right. And so if you're a full-time real estate agent and you're looking to earn at a level that is consistent with your goals, you have to know what the numbers are. Right. And so a lot of times people look at me and say, well, you know, there are certain months that maybe are a little slower on the open house circuit. And that's kind of true. Right. August and December, generally speaking, I don't want to poison anyone's head about not doing open houses in August or December. However, generally speaking, right, people are away, both agents and clients in August, and so sometimes that can slow things down from an open house perspective. And between Thanksgiving and New Year's, sometimes there is a reluctance on this part of the seller to host open houses, right? those are just some realities that show up in our world. Smart listing agents have conversations with sellers saying things like, okay, so if no one else is going to be hosting open houses, you're going to keep your house on the market between Thanksgiving and New Year's, and we're going to host an open house every single weekend, right? Because you're going to win the eyeballs of more people because there are less options. And yet the point is, you have to develop a schedule. I would say, again, there are typically 4 weekends each month, 2 to maybe 3 a weekend. That's 8 to 10 every single month, right? And if you build a system around that, and then recognize that you'll cancel one because a house will sell too quick, or the sellers decide that they don't want to have it, or you're going away on vacation, so you'll miss a weekend or 2. One of them might fall on a holiday, so you might pull it back, right? Stuff will pop up to pull those numbers down. But if you plan them that way and then execute, I can guarantee you will find more business than you know what to do with. Oftentimes people say to me, well, if I'm doing open houses 2, 3, 4 in a weekend, how am I supposed to meet with my buyers? So that's when I was supposed to take buyers out. So you just happen to have a former buyer's agent on the call tonight, which is interesting. I didn't quite know he'd be on the call. I'm not sure if he's listening. He's not looking in his camera. Stephen Scott. He must have me muted. We'll have to fix that. Just a moment, please. We'll see if we can get his attention. One more second and we'll get that taken care of, because I do want him to tell you this story. It'll be more impactful if he tells it. All right, well, this is turning into a longer period of time than I'm willing to wait. So I'll just tell his story then. For those of you who don't know, before Steve was a team leader, he was the buyer's agent on mine and Debbie's sales team. And he's really the person who taught me what open houses could look like at a really high level. Because April, May, and June, and then again, September into early October, those were his hot and heavy open house times. And what that meant was, are you now listening to us, Stephen Scott?
I was not. I was on another Zoom, listening to another Zoom with Mark King, but go ahead. You need me?
Well, so we're talking about open houses, and the question always pops up, right? How do you host 3 or 4 open houses in a weekend and also meet with your buyers? Mm-hmm. And I was telling them that for you, kind of April, May, June, and then in the early fall, those were your heavy open house months. Yep. Where you would do 3 or 4 in a weekend and still manage to meet with 3 or 4 different buyers. Can you describe what that schedule looked like? How did you do that?
It's all about time blocking, guys. All about time blocking. You set your open house times ahead of time, so you know it's 1 o'clock on Saturday, it's 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock on Sunday. You know what times you're doing it, and then you build your buyers around that. And your buyers are going to be okay with your schedule when you're available. I mean, that's how it works. It's pretty simple. Again, it's just about a real simple time blocking plan and setting the open houses ahead of time and then building your buyers around it. Does that make sense?
So are you saying that on any particular day, you might meet with a buyer at 9 o'clock in the morning and work from 9 until 11, and then have an open house from 11:30 until 1:30? and then
Yep.
another open house from 2 until 4, and then meet another buyer at 4:30 and work with them until dinner time.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
So
That's
that's, so in one day, 2 buyers still got serviced and 2 open houses got held, such that more buyers could be generated to have to service the next weekend or
Exactly.
during the week or whatnot.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So is that why they call it work?
Yeah,
I guess so.
yeah.
All right.
Be a busy realtor. There's nothing wrong with that.
All right. Well, thank you for that story. Does anybody have any questions for Steve while he's unmuted and paying attention to us? No? Okay. You're excused. Back to your other Zoom.
I'm going
Thank
back
you.
to Mark. Goodbye.
Okay. Right. So the idea of building that kind of a schedule, how does that sound to some of you? Does it sound exciting? Does it sound doable? Does it sound like ridiculous? Tell me how it sounds. Yeah, John.
Sounds like you're gonna be very busy on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, if you plan it properly, and trust me, busy is certainly better than bored if you're doing the right things. What else?
I was gonna say it's like, but like I like that point that you mentioned about time blocking, because like as long as you're time blocking, and then back to what you said the other day about, you used to tell buyers like after like 6:30, don't call my phone. Like scheduling your days, like you're a professional at the end of the day, so it's like you schedule the times that work around you, and if the buyers or whatever can't work around those times, it's either like it's time for you to either find like a buyer's agent who's available at those times, or like find a way to make your business strategy work without compromising your own personal time and your own personal thing, like schedule that you already have blocked out.
Yeah, it's got to be a give and take, right? It's not you being like a time Nazi around never saying yes to people outside of certain periods of time, right? It's not that either. But it's also not always saying yes when someone says, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Right? Because there's a happy medium with that scheduling. Silva and then Julie.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share very quickly when I was a buyer's agent and now I'm my own buyer's agent. I have all my Sundays blocked whenever I want to have it for the entire year. When you open because I'm the old school paper girl, so I have this calendar on paper that I need in order to keep me in check. So I have all my Sundays blocked. I'm just giving you an example, or whatever time you want to block, but it's there. And then Monday comes, I need to know which is going to be my next open house. So I start advertising. So Monday I start calling other agents. If I don't have my own open house, I have a few agents around the office that I call them. And by the end of the day on Monday, I need to know which is my open house. And then I asked Jen Henry to give me the phone numbers around this address so I can start doing the call arounds. You have time to do the door knocking. You have time for everything. So you just live your life. I live my life around my open house.
Yeah, well, when it's so thank you for that, right? When it's one of your pillars of generating leads, right? That's how you have to behave around them, right? I think the idea of expecting big results from open houses without doing open houses at a big level, you see how those two things don't go hand in hand, right? Remember we talked about the very first day, we talked about you can't expect to, wait, I'll tell you in a second. You can't expect low-end pay for high-end talent, right? You can't expect low-end open house execution with high-end rewards from open houses, right? Those two things are the same. Go ahead, Phil.
I just want to share very quickly that I usually get a new buyer client and work with them from each and every one of my open houses.
Right, and so what Silva just put on the table is a really important concept, because hosting open houses, because that's what realtors do on Sunday, is not a strategic path to growing your business. And I cannot tell you how many times I hear people say things like, oh, I'm hosting an open house on one of my properties on Sunday. And I'll ask the question, oh, great, what do you expect to get out of it? Well, what do you mean? Why would you be spending 2 hours of time with a half hour on each end setting up and whatnot, plus whatever time you had to prep for the stuff at the open house? So you're now spending 3 or 3.5 hours of time with no strategic goal attached to it. That doesn't work, right? It works if you want to waste a lot of time, but doesn't work as a business owner. So Silva's point is, as a business owner, she sets a target for each open house, right? There's a goal. That 3 hours is going to yield me one new appointment with one new client, buyer, seller, or both. Right? I wouldn't be too attached to as to whether it was a new buyer or a new seller, as long as I got a new piece of business out of that, or at least a new piece of business opportunity, right? So you're setting appointments out of your open houses. That also resolves some of the real estate agent issues that pop up with, oh my goodness, I had 30 couples come through my open house. What a great open house it was. Wow, that's interesting. So I'm curious, of those 30 couples, how many were unrepresented and how many of you converted into your own clients? Oh, well, 0. Okay, then why was it a great open house? Right? So some of you have to shift your expectations about what creates a great open house. I'd rather sit in an open house for an hour, have one person come through who was unrepresented, who had kind of cash falling out of his back pocket, ready to buy, then sit for 2 or 2.5 hours with 30 people coming through. Like, I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to actually find new appointments. Does that make sense to everybody? So be careful about how you judge what the metrics are around your open houses, because the whole idea of hosting an open house is to put yourself in the path of additional opportunity, right? And if you can find a buyer for the house that you're sitting in, even better. But what some experienced agents on the call will tell you is that just happens rarely. It doesn't not happen ever. It happens every once in a while where someone will come into your open house and look to buy that particular house, and yet it happens rarely. So just recognize that you need to have another goal on top of, it'd be great to sell that house today. And yet over and above that, what's the business growth goal for this open house? Go ahead, Julie, and then back to Silva.
I wanted to add about time blocking. You don't want to be too available to people, because if you're just like, oh, I'm free, whatever time you pick, you look like you're a bum that doesn't do anything all day.
Yeah, so the idea of filling your calendar, right? I'll tell you a quick story. When I told you last week, when I hired my first assistant, the one who got diarrhea from negotiating. When I hired her, about 6 or 7 weeks into her working for me, I had left our office, and truth be told, I did. I went to use the bathroom, and when I came back, she was on the phone saying something like this to whoever was on the other side. Yeah, no, he's just in the bathroom, so I'm just not sure exactly how long he'll be. And like, I stepped back into the office as she was saying that, and I thought, okay, let's have a conversation around this, right? Now, again, not her fault. Don't blame the person, blame the system. I didn't have a system in place, so she didn't know what I wanted said when people called in and I was not available. I certainly didn't want people to be told that I was using the men's room, right? But over and above that, we just set up a schedule of scripts. And so she went through 1, 2, 3. And the scripts were, first one was, sorry, Rick's out with a client. The second one was, sorry, Rick's taking a new listing. And the third one was, sorry, Rick's at a closing. And she just cycled through. So the first call got out with a client. The second call got taking a new listing. The third call got out of closing. And the fourth call that came in that day, if I wasn't available, she went back to the top and I was out with another client. And so those were the 3 scripts in rotation that she now had as a system to address my phone calls when I either wasn't taking calls or I was in the men's room, right? Or I really was out with a client or taking a new listing. But again, that's just a version of a system we put in place. And to Julie's point, when people called with those messages every time they called, what was the perception I was pushing out? Right, I'm in demand.
Yes.
Exactly right. Success, in demand. Wow, everyone wants a piece of him. I want a piece of him too. Right? It's important. Go ahead, Silva.
Thank you. Yes, and I actually make it very exciting about myself, so I don't fall asleep during the open house. I have system in place, and I'm very excited every time when I'm going to have an open house. And I follow the system, and I never deviate from it because it works. So one of the things that I do is I prepare my knowledge about the market around this particular market pocket that I'm representing. I find some kind of an interesting fact for the neighborhood, and then I always go live. I actually go live on Facebook. So I talk about the market, the property, and and then it is like wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. Well, I mean, it's already done. So I don't even think about it. I can do it with my eyes closed, and I always find it very successful and very interactive.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So we're going to head right where you just went, right, which is what you're doing at the open house. Let's just finalize the idea of locating houses to actually host, right? So what I would do if I were you, and I issue this challenge to every single Ignite class. There's only been one person who's ever taken me up on that challenge, and it's Marissa Gilberti. Is Marissa on the call today? She's not on the call today. And the challenge is this. If you feel like you're lacking business right now, if you're new to the industry, you almost don't, there's no reason not to just dive in and do what I'm about to challenge you to do. If you're relaunching your business, if you look back and say, okay, you know what, I've done X over the last number of months, I'd like to double or triple that, then there's no reason for you to not dive in and make this a reality. And the challenge is just go and do 30 open houses in the next 30 days. What if you just did 30 and 30? Now, some of you are thinking, okay, well, the next 30 days, that's probably 4 weekends. So that's 2 weekend days. Even if I did 2 a weekend, that's not 30. That's not enough. Well, so here's where I want to just make sure we spend a little time on. Who says that open houses have to be on Saturdays or Sundays? What if you decided to find a property that's near, I don't know, near an elementary school? I don't know about in your town, but in my town, the buses drive around empty because everybody drives their kid to school. We still have to have the buses for the 3 children who actually get on the bus. My kids were one of those 3 children, by the way, because like, why do I have to drive you to school? Just go and take the bus. Like it's character building. Things happen on the bus that you need to learn. So go and take the bus. But so you could find an open house that's on the way to an elementary school and do a Wednesday morning from 8 until 10 open house because school starts at 9. And guess what? Everybody and their sister is driving their kid to school and then driving away from the school. You could have a ton of traffic from 8 to 10 on a Wednesday morning for an open house. I've already done drive time open houses, right? Thursday or Friday evenings from 5:30 to 7:30. I would market it with pizza, right? People coming home from work, they missed dinner at home, stop at my open house, grab a slice of pizza, have a couple 2 liters of Diet Coke available. And those have been successful. If you're looking for volume, there's another strategy I'll throw your way, which I love, and I don't think enough people do them. And they're called speed open houses. What if you outlined that you would be at a house for 45 minutes? I will be there from 1 until 1:45. And then you could set up a second one that same afternoon from 2 to 2:45 or from 2:15 to 3 o'clock, right? Depending on how much time you needed between the two. Why would you shorten the time?
Might make you more productive.
Well, you could certainly get more open houses in during a day if you were doing 45 minutes to 1 hour open houses. And what did Silva say in the chat? Go ahead, Silva, say it out loud.
Create urgency.
Right? It creates urgency, right? If people want to see that house and you're going to say, I'm here from this time to this time, I'm going to tell you, we did a lot of this during the shutdown when open houses were kind of tricky. Right? It was either appointment only open houses or short-term open houses. Wait on the front lawn. We will escort you in one at a time. And you have 9 minutes in the house. Go. Right? But we got them through and they were very successful. I kind of love the appointment only version as well. Right? We'll be hosting an open house from 1 until 2 o'clock. There are 6 10-minute blocks available. Please text me ahead of time and book one of those. I have 1, 110, 120, 130, 140, and 150. Not only do you have people texting you, so now you have their what? Contact information. And you have their real contact information instead of whatever fake thing that they sometimes write down, right? But you create a level of urgency. You push people in and then push them right out. You've met them, they saw the house, they get to have an idea about now what if somebody comes in and says, I'd love to spend some more time. You know what, great, I have somebody right now at 120, but I have 130 open, let me plug you back in. Why don't we do this? Let's get you in from 110 to 120. You can then go and check out the exterior, the backyard, the deck, the whole 9 yards, and we'll get you right back in at 1:30 for some extra time. I don't know, don't be careful you're not overthinking some of this stuff, right? There's always a way to solve a potential what if.
Rick,
Yes.
how did you like, in essence, find people for that? Like, what kind of promotion did you do in order to get people to text you in the first place that they wanted these appointments?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I'll give you the old days and the new days, right? The old days was a whole big long list of posting it on as many websites as possible, including in the MLS, so that people could send clients. Remember that you're smarter than the average bear, because what I have recognized is that there are a lot of agents who have people signed up for whatever, for auto updates in their auto update thing in the MLS or whatever company they might use for that, who aren't real clients. And so when you start posting open houses in the MLS and they don't have time to go out with those people that Sunday, they push the open house information out to those folks. And so they're sending unrepresented people to your open house. Happens all the time. If you recognize that it's a possibility, you'll start asking some different questions, right? And finding that even though someone was sent by an agent, they're not necessarily represented. So you put it in the open house. I used to send postcards around during the week. I mean, in the real old days, you put an ad in the newspaper, but that clearly is not what we're doing anymore, right? Today, really for most open houses, you have tons of signs and social media. You're posting them on social media. That's how most people are getting most people to come. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is make sure that your entire database knows where you'll be every single weekend, right? We still do that. We push it out to our entire database, and then we do social media posts for every open house. Text me for a time if you want to kind of do that kind of thing. That's really the way of the world right now. Does that answer that? Cool beans. I love what Silva said before. Isn't it fun, even when Silva steps out to get a cup of coffee, she's still there for us. Frozen in time, but she's still there for us. I love what Silva said before as well about going live when she's at the open house, right? You want to drive more traffic or interest to you, the house, the potential of real estate. Go live while you're there. Why not? It's fun. People dive in. So you've now chosen that open house. Signs are crazy important. I'm going to tell you what, for me, if you're a full-time real estate professional, I would have a minimum of 10 open house signs and use all 10 every open house. Over sign things. I know people who like, oh, well, my house is on a busy road, so I'm just going to put one open house sign at the curb. Why would you waste the opportunity to blast your name all over the place, right? Because oftentimes people are out driving and people say to me all the time, well, is it really worth, like if they weren't on the path of finding an open house, like why do you want them? Well, the answer is you get a lot of people in the neighborhood that way. The answer is the whole idea of open houses is to take people out in this sphere that you don't know and pull them closer to you. You're constantly reaching out to the outer edges and pulling more people closer to you. That's how you meet more people. So worst case scenario, you're building your database. Maybe you find people who are in a rental scenario who are out just kind of what-ifing it, right? You never know who you're going to pull into your inner circle. So I like 8 to 10 open house signs at every single open house. If you're on a busy street and you want to just put one at the road, that's great. But then go up a half a mile and another half mile, and then go down a half mile, another half mile. Just keep pointing people. If you're in a neighborhood, put a sign on every single corner. If it drives people in a circle, that's fine, right? Because eventually they get to you. But then every single corner has your name, your face. If it's on the open house sign, it's about visibility and name recognition. It's about capturing mind share so that you can eventually capture market share, right? So 8 to 10 open house signs is, I think, a necessity. If you're doing multiple open houses, right? Steve described his scenario of go from one to the next. What he used to do is he used to have somebody go and flip the signs around. Last 10 minutes of the previous open house, if he didn't have enough signs to do kind of 8 to 10 here and then another 8 to 10 here, he would pay somebody to come and move some of the signs the last 10 minutes, flip them to the next open house where he geographically was close, because then he had less drive time as well. So remember, it doesn't always have to be you. You could just simply leverage some money to make sure that you can find additional opportunities. Because trust me, it's better to find someone and pay them $20 to go and move your signs and open the opportunity of finding another $500,000 buyer, because a $500,000 buyer is a $12,000 paycheck for you. So are you willing to spend 20 to find someone who's worth 12,000, right? And maybe it doesn't have to cost you anything at all. Maybe what you do is you barter with people on this call. Maybe John and I have a reciprocal relationship that says, you know what, this weekend I'll do that for you, and the next weekend I'm going to double up. So if you'll do that for me, great. And we just know that we're going to do it for each other, and we don't charge each other anything. So it's just a bartering system of time, right? Just always be willing to look past the obstacle, right? What I find is that human nature is, well, that can't work because, well, that can't work because. Look past the obstacle, see the obstacle, but then look past it. Ask yourself the question, well, how do I solve that? How do I make that not an issue? Because there's always a solution. Mr. Mendez, what do you have for us?
Give me a second, I just lost it.
Yeah, no worries. So let's kind of move to, so you're choosing, go ahead, John.
I'm gonna say, so how do we know if there's like rules or like any regulations in terms of like, you know, how many signs we could put in like in a certain area, or if we even can put signs in a certain area?
Yeah, so great question. You do need to know the rules of the municipality that you are open housing in, right? And there is not a big long list of what that looks like. I would encourage that you make a phone call and you talk to the zoning people in that municipality, right? There are some towns in Fairfield County that, as long as it's just for the afternoon for a 2-hour open house, you can put them on the corners, you can put them at the house, you can kind of do what you want. There are some municipalities where the rule is you can put one at the house only. Some municipalities allow things to go out the night before, right? This it fascinates me. The city of Stamford still allows, right? There are people who put out open houses on Friday night, so those signs sit all weekend for that visibility and exposure for an open house on Sunday, right? And so they direct, and then the for sale sign at the house has a little rider on it that says open house Sunday from 1 to 3 or whatever. And there are some municipalities that if you did that by Saturday at noon, all of your open house signs would either be in the dumpster behind Stop and Shop or collected by the zoning official with a big unremovable orange violation sticker on it. So they've ruined your open house signs, right? So you do need to know what those rules are. And you simply either ask colleagues in the office or call direct to the zoning official in that municipality. Do know that there are some towns that want you, like Reading. If you follow the rules in Reading.
So I actually live in Stamford, and like I haven't seen any open house signs anywhere, but like one thing I do see literally like on every street corner is like people for mayor, because I guess they're running, like elections is coming up soon, and like
Yep.
there's literally multiple signs on every street.
Yeah.
And every part of like the west side, and I'm driving up to the north side, I see it everywhere. It's like,
Right. So do me a favor. Don't get me started on political signs versus real estate signs, because we get irritated all the time about our use of signs, and the rules for political signs are different than they are for real estate signs, even though our signs actually generate income for every town and city that we sell houses in, because every time we sell a house, conveyance tax is paid. And yet our rules are different, and they're far stricter, and they enforce them far faster than all of those ridiculous political signs. So again, don't get me started on that, because it's a battle that I've been waging for 20 years and I haven't been able to win in any single town yet. And yet, yes, you're 100% right. As long as you're running for something, you can stick a sign wherever it is you want and keep it there for as long as, because I guarantee you those signs will be there 2 months after election day, because nobody goes and takes them down. At any rate, I told you not to get me started and I got started. So it's all John's fault, everybody, that I'm ranting. So let's kind of bring open houses into the home stretch, right? So you're strategically choosing your open houses based on your business goals. You're utilizing your inventory and your colleagues' inventory by simply reaching out and asking for, hey, I'd like to do, maybe I'll call John and say, hey, John, I'd love to do an open house at 123 Main Street for you next Sunday. Is that something you can set up with your seller? And again, if John says yes, great. If John says no, then I say, you know what, maybe next time, thank you so much. And I'll hang up and I'll call Cal and I'll call Donna, right? Nobody's calling your baby ugly if they say, no, you can't do an open house. Sometimes agents like to do the first weekend themselves. Sometimes agents feel very protective around their inventory, because what they've told their sellers is that they'll be in all of their inventory, right? Again, I went on record earlier saying, I do not think that is a great position for you to take as a listing agent. That shouldn't be your value proposition, that I will personally sit in your open house every weekend. And yet, if open houses every weekend is part of your value proposition, opening it up to other people is not a bad thing. Let me take a half a step sideways and just say this one time, because I'll say it again next week. Remember that part of our conversation was about building a business that you can then scale, right? If you build a business that is entirely around you personally, that's very difficult to scale, because you personally can't be all things to all people, can't be everywhere all the time, right? You max yourself out. And I can tell you that you max yourself out at any given time at about 8 to 10 or 12 listings and about 4 to 5 A buyers. That's as much as any one human can do, right? And even that probably requires some administrative help. And so the idea of building a business, you build your business around the standards that are important to you, not around you personally. And when you build a business around the standards that are important to you, and then you can surround yourself with other people who will uphold that standard. Now, for those of you who have strong egos, this is going to come as a shock to you. But when you build a business around standards, and then you surround yourself with people who can emulate, meet, and exceed those standards, nobody misses you. Because it's not about you. Your business isn't about you. It's about a standard. I will tell you, I learned that myself because I stepped out of my own listings and sales business in 2006. I can't believe it's been 15 years, but it's been 15 years. My sales business still continues on today. I still make money by listing and selling property. I just haven't done it in 15 years. Right? Debbie runs that sales team. We've had bigger teams, we've had smaller teams. And I will tell you that when I first stepped out of it, I was concerned. I was like, all right, well, how is this going to work? And we just had a script. And whether I said it or she said it, the script was, Rick's actually pivoted into a different, because you know I like the word pivot, right? Rick's actually pivoted into a slightly different role inside of our organization. However, he's replaced himself with people who are better than he ever was. I'm curious, how can we help you? There was only one time that someone demanded to speak to me. One time. And if I wanted to have that hurt my feelings, I guess it could have. But what I learned was I built a business around a standard. And so when I stepped out of it, as long as that standard was met and exceeded, no one missed me personally. And if they did, they still did business with my team anyway. Right? You can miss me personally and still do business with my company, with my sales team, with my business partner. So just remember, if you build a business that's all about you, you get stuck in that business. You have to work really hard to maneuver yourself out of that. And you're only one person. So scale happens when you build a business around standards, and then surround yourself with people who will meet and exceed those standards. All righty. Any questions on that? No? I know it was a little off topic, and yet you almost can't hear it enough, right? As you're building a business, you almost can't hear it enough. Because especially as real estate professionals, we get locked into this mindset of, I'm a solo agent, so it's only me and it's all about me. And only I, for those of you out there who are like control freaks, right? Then you go into the whole spin of no one can do it like I can do it. The only way that it can be done is the way I do it. Well, that's fine. Then make the way you do it a standard and find people who will do it that way. Just train them. Right? And you also have to get over it. You have to get over it and yourself. And it's hard. It's hard. When you're a certain behavioral style, trust me, it's hard. I've had to do it over and over and over again. Right? It's a leadership lesson I keep having to learn. And yet the second you learn it and you step away and step back from it and find someone talented to do the thing that you thought only you could do that well, every single time I've done that, I'm like, wow, you know what? They do it better than I ever did it. Why was I afraid to do that? Now my clients, my customers are getting better service than if it was me. You just have to find talented people to surround yourself with. John, and then we're going to move forward.
I was going to say, because you mentioned personality styles, I actually received my DISC profile this week, and I was reading it. and I read it and like it's pretty inaccurate. And that's not even me like trying to like me be like my own ego. I know myself better than anyone, but like I even asked my best friend to read it and they just like they thought it was pretty inaccurate as well.
Well, sometimes that happens, and I'll do a whole half an evening on disc, and so we can circle back around and talk around disc. I would, if you're working with Jen, I would have her validate your disc, right? Because taking the assessment and reading it is not the same as having someone validate it with you. You really need to have someone go through it with you and ask you valid questions to see really where it all comes down. Because I will tell you that 99% of the time, they are shockingly accurate, and sometimes they're shockingly accurate over and above what someone might feel is accurate about themselves. I'm not saying that's your scenario, right, wrong, or in between. I haven't seen it, and I don't know you well enough to be able to know to know the accuracy of anything. And yet, there is accurate more times than it's not. Right, so I would ask for some assistance on validating that, and then perhaps pivot to something called the KPA, the Keller Personality Assessment, to either back up or refute what the disc says. Because the disc is only step one, right? Things like the AVA, the caliper, the KPA, all of those other behavioral assessments, they're like the college version of the disc, really being more like middle school. Right, so you've got to then kind of graduate to one of the larger assessments if you want more info about your behavioral style. All right, so lastly on open houses, right? You're strategically choosing great open houses. You're using social media and blasting your database and minimum of 8 to 10 signs to promote the open house. You're doing things strategically in terms of how you schedule them, in terms of either creating urgency with short-term ones or doing appointment-only ones, or doing a string of open houses, doing enough open houses throughout the course of a year. Now let's talk about kind of the most important stuff, and that is how you're behaving at the open house, right? There is no right or wrong per se way to greet somebody, and I'm not going to step you through step by step, what do you say when they walk in the front door? What I encourage you to do is, if you've never hosted an open house, your homework either this weekend or next weekend is to find someone who is. Call the front desk in your market center, and there's usually a list being that's tallied, and or just go to the MLS and look for open houses from your colleagues this weekend. Run a report based on open houses for the 2 office codes, right? The 2 main office codes, by the way, for Silva, put this in the chat for me. The office code for the Stanford Market Center is 3548. The office code for the Ridgefield Market Center is KELW 120. And the office code for if you're off of a satellite, Newtown is KELW 130, and Westport is KWLY 01. So those are the office codes. If you just put them in and ask for open houses, you'll get open houses based on the agents affiliated with those MLS office codes, right? And so the point of that is what? What was I talking about? Why was I saying that? Oh, so if you've never hosted an open house, what I want you to do this weekend or next weekend is I want you to find a colleague and call them and say, hey, I've never hosted an open house. What I'd love to do is shadow you at your open house this weekend. And then just go and shadow, be a fly on the wall, right? Recognize that you're not sharing the leads that come in. You're there just to kind of learn. You're there to stand in the back and watch somebody who has some experience with open houses, excuse me, run the open house, right? And what's cool is, depending on who you choose, and I mean this with love and affection, is you'll either see really cool things that you want to emulate, or you'll see things that you think, you know what, I think I would do that differently. Both are valuable learning tools, right? And so the idea of shadowing is to kind of get your feet wet, because once you've shadowed, then the next piece of homework is now start scheduling your own open houses. Please don't wait until we're done with Ignite at the beginning of November to start figuring out how to host your first open house sometime in November. If you don't have an open house scheduled for this weekend, for those of you who have hosted open houses before, there is still time. There's no reason why you shouldn't be in an open house this weekend. Unless there's anybody on the call who has sold at least 50 houses in the last 12 months, then you're excused. That was a joke. Laugh, come on. I know it's late in the day, but if I have to be here, you have to be here, so suck it up. But what's my point there? If you don't have more business and you know what to do with, and the business is literally falling out of your ears, then there's no reason not to host an open house this weekend. You still have time. It's Thursday night. You have all of tomorrow to make a phone call. If you don't have your own inventory, make a phone call and find an open house to be in. Again, if you've never hosted an open house on your own, you have tonight and tomorrow to find open houses this weekend that your colleagues are hosting, and then go and ask to be a fly on the wall and shadow so that you can do your own next week, right? This is not about let's get ready to get ready to get ready to get ready. This is about get into action, right? Get into action. How you behave at the open house is simple, right? The answer is professional and with the heart of a consultant. You want to ask questions instead of tell people what's going on, right? Hosting an open house is not about let me tell you all about the house. Has anyone ever been to an open house, like not as a real estate agent, and had someone just talk at you for 12 minutes or 15 minutes as you literally went from room to room to room? And they say things like, when they open the door with the room that has the toilet and the shower, and they say things like, well, here's the bathroom. Oh, well, my goodness, thank God you're here. Right? The room with the refrigerator and the stove. Well, here's the kitchen. Oh, wow, my goodness, you are just a wealth of knowledge, right? It kind of makes me like it's like scratching the fingers down a chalkboard, right? Instead, ask questions. Hey, it's great to see you. I'm curious, what brought you here today? Hey, I'm curious, do you live in the neighborhood? Hey, I'm curious, how can I help you today? Hey, if you have any questions, I'll always be a room or so away. Right? I never took people by the hand and led them around the house. I kind of followed them around the house at a distance, because if they had questions, I wanted to be certain that I was within earshot to be able to answer it. But take the approach of, how can I help you? One of the best ways I know how to convert unrepresented persons at an open house is to not treat them like a prospect when they walk in the front door. Instead, treat them as if they're already your client. Because when someone walks in the door and you treat them like a prospect, again, they see that coming a mile away. Oh, this is somebody who's trying to get my business. Nope. Instead, the way you win, they walk in the door. Hey, it is so great to see you. How can I be of help to you today? Ask more questions. Are you from the area? If they say yes, great. Do you live locally? Do you currently rent, or do you own? What brings you in today? I find that when people are presented with simple, honest questions, they are more apt to answer them honestly. I've had more people in my career say things like, well, just so you know, we're not really here to buy anything. We live up the street. We've been dying. We know that she redid the kitchen. We've been dying to see the kitchen. Awesome. Would it be helpful if we just kind of started in the kitchen? Like, let's just go to the kitchen then. Why do you need to see the den if you're here to see the kitchen? Right? I'm curious, do you have any questions about the house? Hey, I'm curious, is this if you have someone who says, you know, we're hunting for a house, great, I'm curious, is this a house you can see yourself living in? If you don't ask that question, you don't have the data that you need to know if you should pivot to other houses. Right? So make sure you're asking that question. Hey, I'm curious. Is this a house that you can see yourself living in? And they say yes or no. Either one is okay. Yes. Oh, real? Wow, great. I'm curious, should we be sitting down and writing an offer? Well, maybe. Would it be helpful? I'm actually out of here in 20 minutes. Would it be helpful if we met back at the office so I could pull some comps for you and do some market conditions homework so that you can make the best decision possible on moving forward on this property? The other thing that I used to do is always know, what other properties in that price range, in that general area, were available.
When do you ask the critical question of whether or not they're already represented?
I don't. I let the app or the sign-in sheet answer that question for me.
What
Right,
app
Susie?
what app do you use?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I can certainly, does anybody on the call use an open house app to help answer Dana's question?
No, but there's one called Spacio, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Spacio is one of them. Is Debbie on the call? I know Debbie uses, she builds her own. She builds her own landing pages for each of her listings and then has people sign in on a Google Doc. So she texts them the link when they walk in the door and they just do it on their phone. Right? If you're interested in how she does that, there is a recorded YouTube video that you can find on the YouTube channel. And I can certainly have her do another class on it, or at least come on and explain what she does and show you some examples. I can have her do that next week for you if you'd like. But I just think it's easier nowadays. Just shoot it to their phone, right? We went that direction when we were just coming back from the lockdown period last year, where no one wanted to touch anybody, right? Or touch anything or a pen or whatever, right? That's kind of relaxed itself over the last year, and yet still having an idea of what Debbie does is she turns it into a QR code that she either has on her phone or has on a piece of paper. So then people just take their phone and scan the QR code, push the link, and then they fill out the information, right? And so then they submit it, it comes back to me or on my phone. And then as they're talking, as I'm walking with them, as I'm talking with them about the house, as I'm answering questions, I'm reviewing that just to make sure that they haven't signed in as like, you know, Ben Gay or Mickey Mouse or, you know, whatever. And I review their information. And if it says, you know, currently contracted with another real estate firm, I'm curious, it says that you're contracted with another real estate firm. Who is it that you're contracted with? Oh, I'm contracted with Coldwell Banker. Oh, excellent. You know, who at Coldwell Banker is your agent? I ask those questions because what I find is that oftentimes people can't answer them because they're not really contracted with somebody else. And there are some times where you ask that question and they can't quite answer it. And they kind of look at you and say, okay, busted. Not really contract with anybody. You know what? No worries. I'll just make a note of that here. Again, if I can be of any help, I'm happy to be of help. It's not like I do a little happy dance in front of them saying, all right, now you're mine, right? That's not the point. The point is offer your service, because the way you convert people at open houses is to help them accomplish the goal that they have set out for themselves at the open house. If it's to check out the kitchen, well, then you can win points by fast forwarding the conversation, and let's get you to the kitchen. Hey, I'm curious, do you have any questions about the kitchen? If I can't answer them, I'm happy to do a quick text to the seller, or I have your name and telephone number. I'm happy to ask them that question when I see them a little later on and get back to you. I've won business long-term because when they walked into the kitchen and said, oh my goodness, where did they get this granite? I love this granite. I just followed up with the seller and then followed up with the homeowner about where they got the granite. They went and redid their kitchen. And then 2 years later, because they were now in my database and I had a 36 touch program and I was following up with them, I was the guy who was nice enough to get them their awesome granite connection. So that when they redid their kitchen. So now here's what I'm not saying. It'd be nice if every time they walked into their kitchen, they thought, oh, look, this is a gorgeous piece of granite and it's all because of Rick. That is unlikely to be the case. And yet, because I got them the connection and they used that, there was a connection with me that then when I followed up every other week or so when they got something from me, it wasn't the guy who sold them their house, but I was certainly the guy who got to list the house 2 years later when they put the house on the market, because I met them at an open house and just gave them what they were looking for. It was about asking questions and service, not about conversion, right? Like I said, I also used to figure out what other properties in that same price range were generally in that same area. There was a time in my career where, before the Showing Time app extravaganza, which is now turning into, what's it called? Broker Bay, right, is what we're pivoting to. There was a time before all of that where you just kind of called the sellers and made the appointments direct. And so one of the things I used to do for open houses is I used to find 4 or 5 houses around the open house that I was hosting. And I would call either the sellers or the listing agents, depending on the appointment setting process. And I would say to them, hey, look, I'm hosting an open house at my own listing over here. I just wanted to see if it was possible. I'll be there from 1 until 3. Oftentimes people come to a house like mine and find that what they really are looking for is something slightly different. And so I just wondered, could I make like a tentative appointment between 3:15 and 4 o'clock with you today, just in case I have folks who come to the open house who maybe want to see your house as well. And by 3 o'clock or so, I'll know whether or not that's going to happen. I can give you a quick call back and say yay or nay. But I wondered if you could just kind of pencil me in for a potential showing. That always worked really well, because then I was able to move people from the open house right into another showing, such that they didn't have to wait for me to go and do the homework that night and send them an email about other houses and whatnot. Let's just build them on the momentum. Let's go show it, right? And then, of course, lastly, you want to have a powerful follow-up system. And by a powerful follow-up system, what I mean is kind of constant contact for that first week after the open house. Now, that doesn't mean call them and 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 call them. What it means is use all the media available to you to reach out. And so what that looks like is a version of this, right? So I met Donna at the open house. We have a conversation. I find out that she's searching for a property in X and Y towns, and that she's been looking for about 3 weeks. She's really early in her search. Her house isn't even on the market. And she thanks me for my time. I maybe offer her the KW consumer app so that she can view properties directly on her phone, right? I might shoot that over to her before she leaves. Again, offering a service. My follow-up with Donna the first time, she left me at 2:30. I make my follow-up phone calls for open houses that afternoon. So before dinner, I'm just reaching out with a quick phone call to say, it was a pleasure spending time with you earlier today. I just wanted to follow up and say thank you so much for creating an enjoyable afternoon for me. If there is any way I can help you in your home search, whether that means talking with you about getting your house on the market or your search up in my area, please don't hesitate to call. I'm more than happy to assist. And if it's okay with you, I'll send you some data on the towns and the availability based on our conversation earlier today, first thing tomorrow morning. Just a simple, it's a gratitude call. It's a thank you so much and how can I help you? Call. Here's what I learned. People who answer and take your call, first of all, people are more apt to take your call that day than any other day of the week for the next 30 days. Right? If you call them that day, they're still in that open house mode. You just saw them a couple of hours ago. They're more apt to answer the phone and be appreciative of the thank you. If you wait until the next day or Tuesday or Wednesday or the following Thursday, right? Too much time has gone by and you're kind of out of their head. They've moved out of that, boy, that whole open house thing was fun this afternoon version of the afternoon. They're back into work mode. You're kind of an afterthought. So I like kind of communicating rather immediately. And then the next day is an email with whatever I promised them, either more houses for her to consider or information about the town. If she hasn't put her house on the market, maybe I'll shoot her a little, 10 steps to getting your home ready for the market, something or other, some kind of item of value, which could also be properties to look at on Monday. Tuesday is a text. Just to say, hey, just check in and make sure that you received what I sent yesterday. Again, it was so great to meet you on Sunday. Hey, I'm curious, would it be beneficial to you to schedule some time for us to have a full-blown buyer consult? I'm just going to ask in the text for an appointment to do that. Nowadays, you can follow that up with, we can do that via Zoom one night this week or in person on the weekend. Which do you prefer? Because if you haven't done your buyer consult on Zoom, it's a winner. It's a whole lot easier to get the appointment during the week, one evening, spend 40 minutes with the buyer consult, which again, we're going to give you an entire script for the buyer consult and spend all of next week working on that. Right. So for those of you who are like, okay, well, what is that? What is that all about? We're getting there. We just haven't gotten there yet. We'll hand you all of that information, I promise. But think about it. For those of you with some experience, sometimes it's kind of a drag for the buyers to have the consult Saturday morning at 10, because Saturday morning at 10, what do they really want to do?
Watch their kid's soccer game.
Well, Saturday morning at 10, they want to go see houses, right? They don't want to sit in the office. If they've already made an appointment with you, was my point. Right, so Saturday morning at 10, they want to be in the car actually viewing property. And when you front load it with the consult, it can sometimes be a little bit of a drag for them. So I love the idea of moving the buyer consult to one evening during the week. We spend that 30 or 40 minutes, get that out of the way, get hired, and then we're ready to go on Saturday or Sunday, right? Marion asks, do you offer the KW app to all open house visitors? 100%. It's just a way for them to communicate with you and see all the inventory that's on the market. Because it's not just KW inventory, right? That's IDX enabled. It's the MLS on their phone. So yeah, no reason. Boom, boom, boom. Give it to everybody. So what we're up to. So we're up to Wednesday now, right? So Wednesday, go and friend them on Facebook. So you called them on Sunday, you emailed them on Monday, you had a text communication on Tuesday. Sometimes that's enough, right? Sometimes they'll respond to the text and say, yes, let's make an appointment. And then you'll just pick up the phone and call them. Great, what's a good time for me to call? We can call and schedule it together. Right? You do always want to kind of make that left-hand turn to let's have a phone conversation, because that's the way you really connect and move things forward. Wednesday, friend them on Facebook, whether they answered your text, whether they didn't, friend them on Facebook. Because a lot of people live their lives on Facebook. And so you friend them on Facebook, and then by Wednesday night, you maybe send them one of those Facebook Messenger things, right?
I have a question about that,
Yes.
because, I mean, I have like a business page, but you can't friend people from a business page. And I wouldn't, I wouldn't want to be like friending somebody from my personal page, because there's things that get discussed on my personal page with actual real friends that aren't the kinds of, that might be, I don't know, shall I say, not neutral enough that you want somebody that doesn't know you to be seeing, the kinds of things like political discussions, for example, that could be a turnoff to somebody, because what if they don't feel the way you do?
Yeah.
So
There are some answers that I'm going to give that some of you aren't going to like. And I'm going to let Christine go first, because Christine has some words of wisdom for us on this. Go ahead, Christine.
So to that point, Dana, I do friend them, but I friend them on LinkedIn, not Facebook. I do LinkedIn first because that's a business page. It's, business to business. People don't get offended if you friend them on LinkedIn. Facebook, they could, because you're not really friends, and it's kind of, to some people, a little creepy. But if they're on LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, everybody should be on LinkedIn, then by all means, definitely do it on LinkedIn with a professional note. You could write a personal note, say, hey, nice meeting you, would love to connect here on LinkedIn.
that's a good idea, because then you also avoid having controversial topics that they might not agree with.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I love that idea. And the other thing that I can encourage is that you've now stepped into an industry where your name is your business. You no longer can afford to have controversial conversations publicly on Facebook.
Absolutely. And Rick, let me just add to what I was saying too. You also, everybody should be on Instagram as well. You can easily connect with people on Instagram too. And because, there's no limit for how many people you can follow and have them follow, that's another way to get around the creepiness of being a friend on Facebook. And Rick, to your point, that political thing, everybody should absolutely not do anything politically on Facebook.
Politics, religion, sex. Those are three things like that your mother and your grandmother always told you, don't talk about in mixed company. Those are also the three rules of social media, right? Because here's the thing, not only is your name associated with your business, you simply can't escape that. People will go and stalk you online before they say yes, or right after they say yes to hiring you. And if you've decided to have a political conversation of one persuasion or the other, you are absolutely annoying and irritating 50% of the potential clientele for your business. And I can tell you that people get upset when I say these things, because they take the stand of, well, I can say whatever I want. Well, you're right. You know what? You can say whatever you want as long as you understand the ramifications of what that potentially does to your business. And the larger version of this is that as one team, when you start to say things online that are offensive or controversial to 50% of the buying and selling community, it doesn't just affect you, it affects all of us. Right. And so we do have a social media policy, which I'm happy to send out to everybody, that says you need to keep it tame. Right. If you are incensed about something or other, go private. I'm not saying don't be incensed about one thing or the other. I'm not saying don't have views. What I'm saying is the smart business decision about social media platforms is to remove anything controversial from those platforms, because like it or not, you become a more public figure when you say yes to having a real estate career. It's just what you said yes to. I didn't say yes for you. You said yes to it. You maybe didn't realize that, but that's why we have class, to make sure that you're not kind of stepping in it and then wondering, oh, that's weird. Why don't I have any business? Right? So again, if you have those conversations, have them privately. Don't do them publicly, because they do you and everybody else a whole lot of harm. John.
I was gonna say that Facebook now pretty much has a lot of features where like you could either like post something and make it available to only like friends of friends, or like just your friends or specific friends, or have a post that's completely private. Like that's completely, you can do that all through Facebook. If you want to post something, let's say it is controversial, you just have to make sure you're on top of making sure every time you click post it's for like specific friends. Same thing with Instagram. They have like a close friends feature. So whenever you post something, only your close friends have it. Or let's say you use Snapchat. Snapchat has private stories. So if you post something on Snapchat, you post it on your private story. That way you don't get the unnecessary attention. You just got to make sure you're on top of making sure you click the right like post, and that way nothing ever gets posted where someone can see it. And
Yeah,
also, I'm gonna just add on too. Law 38 of 48 laws of power. Think as you like, but behave like others. It's pretty much like have your views, just as you guys were all saying on certain whatever topics, XYZ. But it's like, as you guys were saying, like when you're in the eyes of the public, you're here to sell real estate, not be a social activist.
Yeah, agreed. And the reality of, like, you can be on top of your settings, right? That's what John's talking about, right? No, and yet do remember that how many of us have ever hit reply all when we shouldn't have hit reply all, right? So you can decide to do what you want to do because your settings are a certain way, and you still may step in it. So I think the simpler and the cleaner way to do that is to simply remove yourself from those kinds of conversations when it's controversial, right? It's just there's no reason to have to go and have those conversations publicly. If you want to share information with people who are close to you, you can do that privately, whether it's from a settings or pick up the phone and call them or text them or Zoom with them and have a right. So please don't leave here saying, well, Rick said we shouldn't all be Americans and there's no such thing as free speech, because that's not what Rick said. What Rick said was be really cautious about how you present yourself online, because regardless of business page versus personal page, regardless of LinkedIn versus Instagram versus Facebook, regardless of any of that, if people are looking at across your platforms to get a read on you because they're interested in hiring you, you want to make sure that you get the job and not give anybody a reason not to give you the job. All right. So last thing on open houses. Certainly by Wednesday or Thursday, what you want to be doing is setting up some version of an appointment with those folks you met last week. If you whether you've been texting back and forth or even had some phone calls, or they've only responded to the email saying thanks, by Thursday, you want to make another phone call outbound to simply say, hey, I'm setting up hope you've had a great week. I'm setting up my calendar for the weekend and it's filling up fast. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to grab a slot to be able to come up and see some houses or sit down and have a face-to-face consult or whatever it is you're offering, right? So you want to make sure that you are by Thursday setting up an appointment for that coming weekend. And yes, that means calling and simply asking for an appointment. Would it be helpful if we spent 30 to 40 minutes together so I can understand at a really deep level exactly what it is you're looking for and understand your timing. That's great. Why don't we meet in the office? We can talk for about 30 minutes. And if you'd like to see some houses after that, I can send you a couple of suggestions between now and then, and you can kind of make some choices or whatever. Right, but the idea is to adopt them as your clients immediately when you meet them, offer service after service after service, and then follow up like nobody's business. Because again, you're always modeling behavior, and the behavior that people are looking for from someone that they would hire is that you're smart, resourceful, that you listen to what it is they're looking for and not just talk over them and decide how they're going, what properties you think they should live in. And almost as important as all those other things, that you are communicative and available, right? So you want to, it's always a balancing act, but the follow-up process that we just outlined kind of sends all of that messaging. Here's a tool that you can use, following up to see if there's anything else you need. So, and sending info on a town, sending updates on houses, offering another appointment, right? You're modeling the behavior of someone who is attentive and is interested in assisting them. There's nothing wrong with showing someone that you would be honored to assist them in creating real estate results, as long as you're doing it from the perspective of, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? Any questions on that? All right. Any questions on open houses in general? Spent a little more time than I anticipated on that, and yet I hope it was comprehensive for you to kind of walk you through really strategically how open houses work, because you can do open houses and then you can do open houses strategically. They're two different things. What we talked about today was doing open houses strategically, from choosing the open house all the way through the follow-up. There's strategy involved in each of those steps and activities, versus, oh man, it's Saturday at 3 o'clock. I was supposed to do an open house tomorrow, and I don't know where I'm going to do it, or maybe I forgot to tell my own seller that I was going to do it. So let me see if I can just grab something right at the last minute. There's nothing strategic about that. And the results tend to be, unless you're basing your income on luck, which is not what I encourage you to do, right? So if you're basing things on luck, then throw something together and hope for the best. But as we all know, hope is not a strategy, at least not a consistent one. And so therefore, you need to kind of get out in front of all of this. I would plan a week or two at a time. Have, as Silva said before, have a full month planned. You may not know exactly which house you're going to be in, but you know when you're doing your open houses. Are you doing a Thursday morning? Are you doing a Friday night? Are you doing a Saturday? Are you doing 2 on Sunday? What does the next 30 days look like for you? Start there in a calendar, and then strategically build each weekend. Make sense? John, you had one question and then we're out. Bring us home.
I was gonna ask, it's a little, I guess, more of a not so serious but kind of serious question. What's the timeline for that challenge? Do we have to complete it by the 30 for 30 challenge that you got? Can I when the latest I can take you up on that?
Well, here's what I would say. If you're looking to launch your business out of the gate successfully, I would start it as quickly as you possibly can. However, I'm not going to hold you to, if there's something that's holding you back from starting it this weekend, then start it on Monday. I mean, here's what I'll tell you. Send me a text that says start the clock, and I'll count down for 30 days, right? Maybe you don't have open house signs, right? So you need to order your open house signs and be ready for it. I get it, right? Sometimes you don't have some of the tools. Send me a text that says, I'm doing that 30 and 30, go. And I will be there rooting you on. You need somebody to come and move your signs one day because you can't find somebody, you call me, I'll come do it for you. All right, guys. I will see you not tomorrow and not Monday. I'll see you Tuesday at 4. In the meantime, make sure you plug into the things that are on the calendar. Have a fantastic weekend. Like I said, for those of you who have hosted open houses before, make sure you're in an open house this weekend. That's your homework. Host an open house with a goal of finding at least one new appointment. For those of you who have never done one before, find an open house to shadow somebody, and then let's report back on Tuesday where we went. Have a great one. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
My pleasure.